I bought the same fishing rod twice in 1 week. Same model, same store, the same guy at the register gave me a look the second time, like he was starting to worry about me. Both rods were going-away gifts. 2 men I had worked next to for the better part of 30 years were retiring the same week from the same valve plant, 4 days apart, and within 2 years the research on male mortality would explain why only one of them survived. I decided, with the deep creativity of a man who hates shopping, that a fishing rod was the correct way to send off a working man. So I bought 2. I wrapped them both badly. I gave one to Ron on the Tuesday, one to Dave on the Saturday, and I felt pretty good about myself for the rest of the month. 2 years later, one of those rods had landed a bass the size of a loaf of bread. The other was still in its plastic sleeve, leaning in a garage, next to a man who was not there anymore. Ron and Dave were the same on paper. Same age, 63. Same 3 decades on the same floor. Same pension, give or take. Same send-off, same cake, same fishing rod from the same idiot. And within 2 years, one of them was thriving and one of them was gone. And the difference between them is the most under-discussed thing about retirement, the thing nobody puts on the card. Here's what the numbers actually say, and it's not the thing you've heard. There's a study by 2 economists, Maria Fitzpatrick at Cornell and Timothy Moore, called The Mortality Effects of Retirement. They looked at what happens to American men right at age 62, the age when about 1/3 of men first claim Social Security and walk out the door. And they found something grim and specific. Male mortality goes up by about 2% right at 62. Not a vague trend, a measurable bump, the moment the work stops. When they ran the harder version of the math, the version built to isolate cause, they found that retiring 1 year earlier raised a man's risk of dying early by about 5.5%. For women, no real effect, just the men. And the causes weren't mysterious old age stuff. The clearest increases were in traffic accidents, lung cancer, and emphysema, and the men getting hit hardest were the unmarried ones and the ones with less schooling, which already tells you something. Those aren't diseases of retirement. They're the diseases of a man with too much unstructured time and nobody checking on him. Now, before this turns into a reason to never stop working, it isn't. A separate review looked at 25 long-term studies and found that early retirement, on its own, did not make people die sooner. On its own. That little phrase is carrying the whole video. There's actually a term in occupational health research for the flip side of this. The healthy worker effect. The observation that people who stay employed tend to look artificially healthy in the data because the sick ones already left the workforce. Once you account for that, retirement doesn't kill men. It's just the day the scaffolding comes down. What kills men is whatever that scaffolding was holding up. Ron was the scaffolding type. 31 years, and he was the guy who could tell which machine was about to fail by the sound it made. He came in early just to walk the floor. The plant wasn't his job. It was his standing in the world. The reason the younger guys said his first name with a little respect baked into it. Take a man like that, hand him a Tuesday with nothing in it, and you've taken away a lot more than a paycheck. There is a number for this, too. Researchers using the Health and Retirement Study, which has followed more than 13,000 Americans over 50, sorted people by how much purpose they felt in their lives. Over the next 8 years, the group with the strongest sense of purpose had a death rate roughly half that of the group with the weakest sense of purpose, more than double the risk. And that difference was sorted almost entirely by whether a man felt his days were for something. A psychologist named Patricia Boyle at Rush University Medical Center found the same shape in her own work. Higher purpose, sharply lower odds of dying inside the study window. And a large analysis in the journal JAMA Network Open went so far as to call purpose a modifiable risk factor. Modifiable. Same category as blood pressure. Something a man can lose, and something he can get back. Ron lost his on a Friday with a cake. By spring, he had stopped walking the dog. Then, there is the part nobody warns men about, mostly because men are spectacularly bad at noticing it happen. The work friends. Not friends exactly, but the guys you stand next to 9 hours a day, the ones who know how you take your coffee, and that your knee has been bad since 2009. For a lot of working men, that is the entire social world. It does not feel like one, because you did not choose it and you would never call it that. But it is load-bearing. Julianne Holt-Lunstad, a researcher at Brigham Young, has spent her career putting hard numbers on this, and they are blunt. Being socially connected raises your odds of survival by about 50%. Loneliness is tied to a 26% jump in the risk of dying. Isolation, living alone, every version of being cut off from other people lands in the same dangerous neighborhood as smoking, and she has said exactly that in those words. Her research became prominent enough that in 2023, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued a formal advisory on the loneliness epidemic, citing her work directly and calling social disconnection a public health crisis. A Japanese study that tracked people in a town called Ise found it landing squarely on men. Retired men who did not stay socially engaged were significantly more likely to die than the ones who did. And here is the cruel mechanics of it. A man retires, and the friendships were attached to the job, so when the job ends, the friendships, it turns out, were only renting space in the building. When the building closed, they did not follow him home. 6 months later, he realizes he has not had a real conversation since the cake. I want to stop here for a second, because if you're watching this and you're a few years out, or a few months out, or you walked out last Friday, this stopped being about Ron a while ago. Go look at your own calendar, not your retirement account. Your calendar. The actual squares with actual things in them. Count how many of those things would survive your job going away tomorrow. The standing breakfast, the league, the volunteer shift, the guy you'd call on a Wednesday for no reason at all. If the honest number is low, that isn't a character flaw, and it isn't a tragedy yet. It's just information. It's the same information Ron had and didn't look at, and the same information Dave had and did. Because Dave got the identical fishing rod. Dave had the identical Friday. And Dave is the reason this isn't a sad video. Dave was not a sentimental man. He did not journal. If you'd told Dave he needed to cultivate purpose and connection, he'd have told you precisely where to put it. But he did one deeply unglamorous thing. He refused to let the week go blank. He took a part-time job at a hardware store he didn't need the money from, 3 mornings a week, mostly so he'd have somewhere to be by 8 and somebody to argue with about table saws. He kept coaching a little league team long after his own grandkids had aged out of it, which is either generous or the act of a man genuinely afraid of an empty Saturday. And honestly, it was probably both. None of that shows up in a study labeled The Cure. But look at what it actually was. A reason to get up. People expecting him. A Tuesday with something in it. The Japanese have a word for this, ikigai, roughly translated as a reason for being, the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. Dave never would have used the word. But what he built at that hardware store, on that baseball diamond, was exactly the thing it describes. He'd rebuilt the scaffolding out of completely different materials, a cash register, a pitching rotation, a fishing rod that actually got wet, and the new structure held him up the exact same way the plant used to. That's the whole thing, and it's almost insulting how simple it looks once you set the two men side by side. Same age, same job, same pension, same send-off, same rod. One treated his last day of work as the finish line, the other treated it as a renovation. The timing is the part that genuinely scares me. The danger isn't spread evenly across the rest of a man's life. It clusters. The first couple of years are the cliff. That's where Fitzpatrick and Moore's bump shows up. That's the stretch when the old structure is gone and the new one hasn't been built yet, and a man can drift a very long way in 24 months. Ron drifted the whole distance. By the time anybody thought to worry, the worrying was already too late to do much with. And I keep landing on the fact that I couldn't tell at the time which one I should have been worried about. If you'd made me put money down at those two parties, I'd have bet on Ron lasting forever. He was the strong one. He was the one who knew the machines. Dave was the one who told the same joke at every Christmas party for 10 years running. And the strong one turned out to be the one who couldn't survive the quiet. Dave still fishes. He wore that rod out so thoroughly he had to replace the reel, and he tells the story of the loaf of bread bass like it grows a little every year, which it does. Ron's rod never came out of the plastic. His wife handed it back to me after the funeral, still in the sleeve, still with the little price tag I had forgotten to peel off, and said she figured I should have it. I never went and bought a third one. I've still got Ron's. It's in my garage, in its plastic, leaning in the corner, and every now and then I think about taking it out and using it. And then I don't.